The hallway was his stage. Noah paced the length of the lockers, his voice shifting pitch as he mimicked the history teacher's gravelly lecture. He stopped mid-stride, dropped his jaw, and widened his eyes, freezing in a perfect caricature of the man's frustration. A group of students passing by slowed, then stopped. A ripple of laughter broke out, quickly growing into a roar that filled the corridor. Noah didn't just tell jokes. He weaponized the mundane, turning every teacher's quirk and every student's slip-up into a punchline. He thrived on the noise. He leaned back against the cool metal of the lockers, arms crossed, letting the sound of their approval wash over him. He watched them, eyes scanning the crowd to see who was laughing the loudest. He adjusted his posture, waiting for the next opening, the next person to walk by, the next opportunity to keep the momentum going. Every laugh was a vote, every grin a confirmation of his status. He stood there, the center of the hallway, waiting for the next beat to drop. He needed the noise to feel like he was in control. The classroom door creaked, a sharp contrast to the chaotic energy of the hallway. Ethan stepped inside, his movements tight and guarded. He kept his chin tucked toward his chest, fingers white-knuckled as they gripped his backpack straps. He navigated the rows of desks, head down, and slid into the furthest seat in the back corner. He tried to disappear into the shadows. Noah, already seated near the front, watched him. His eyes narrowed, tracking the new arrival with the focus of a predator spotting a stray. When the teacher called the roll, Ethan's response was a ghost of a sound, a thin, wavering whisper that barely crossed the desk. Noah didn't wait. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. He stood, cleared his throat with exaggerated precision. He mimicked the whisper, pitching his voice into a high, trembling whine that turned Ethan's soft words into a caricature. The room erupted. Ethan froze, his shoulders rising toward his ears. Noah sat back down, a sharp, satisfied smirk fixed on his face. The class was his again. The routine settled into the classroom like a permanent shadow. Every morning, the ritual repeated with mechanical precision. Ethan would enter, eyes fixed on the floor, and Noah would wait, poised to strike. The moment Ethan spoke, a question about an assignment, Noah was there. He would twist the words, distorting the pitch. It became a reflex for the class. They looked to Noah first, waiting for the punchline before they even acknowledged Ethan's contribution. Ethan stopped trying to hide in the back rows. Instead, he brought a sketchbook. He kept his head down, pencil moving rapidly. Noah saw the sketchbook as a new challenge. He began leaning over the aisles, making loud, sharp comments. The laughter hit Ethan like physical blows. His posture changed. He stopped sitting upright, his shoulders slumping lower and lower. Noah watched him retreat, feeling a surge of power. Ethan became nothing more than a prop for his own daily performance. The atmosphere in the room shifted the moment the teacher pinned the large white sheet to the front board. The prompt was simple: draw someone who inspires you. A ripple of activity moved through the rows. Students immediately began pulling out colored pencils and charcoal, their voices rising in excited chatter. Noah leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against his desk, already planning a joke. He looked toward the back, waiting for Ethan to react, but Ethan did not look up. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, his movements fluid and purposeful. While others were busy comparing sketches, Ethan remained motionless for a long beat. He took a slow, deep breath, then pressed his pencil to the paper. His hand moved with a steady, rhythmic pressure that seemed entirely disconnected from the noise. He did not glance at his neighbors. He did not check to see if Noah was watching. He worked with a singular, quiet intensity, carving lines into the page. Noah's smirk faltered. The room felt suddenly tighter, the air heavy with the scratch of lead on paper. Ethan was not drawing a hero from a magazine. He was drawing something else, and for the first time, the silence he kept didn't feel like a retreat. It felt like a preparation. The presentations began with the usual vanity. Students paraded their sketches of famous faces, seeking validation from the crowd. Then, the teacher called Ethan. He stood up, his movements stiff but deliberate. He walked to the front of the room, holding his paper against his chest as if it were fragile. The class waited, eyes darting toward Noah. Noah sat forward, his mouth already curling into a smirk. Ethan reached the center of the room and turned to face his peers. He held the drawing up. It was not a celebrity. It was a young man sitting in a wheelchair, rendered with startling, raw detail. Ethan cleared his throat. His voice cut through the room. "My brother cannot walk," he said. The smirk on Noah's face froze. Ethan did not look at the floor. He kept his gaze level, his voice steady and resonant. "He spends his days in a chair, but he never complains. He teaches me that strength is not about what you can do, but how you handle what you cannot." The room went dead silent. The air seemed to vanish. Ethan stood tall, his hands firm on the paper, and the classroom was held captive by the weight of his truth. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Ethan did not move. He stood at the front of the room, his gaze sweeping across the rows until it locked directly onto Noah. There was no fear in his eyes, only a quiet, steady resilience that made the room feel smaller. Noah felt the air leave his lungs. He tried to swallow, but his throat felt dry, constricted by the sudden, sharp reality of his own behavior. He looked down at his desk. His own paper lay there, a crude, biting caricature of a classmate he had spent the morning perfecting. He looked back at Ethan, then down at the drawing again. The lines seemed jagged, ugly, and hollow. Noah reached out, his fingers trembling slightly, and grabbed the edges of his paper. He did not hesitate. He crushed the sheet into a tight, uneven ball, the sound of the paper tearing and crumpling, echoing in the quiet room. He shoved the ball deep under his desk, hiding it from view, but the weight of it remained. He slumped back, his spine pressing hard against the plastic. The morning sun cut across the classroom floor, highlighting the dust motes in the air. Noah walked through the door, his pace slower than usual. He did not scan the room for an audience. He did not look for the usual group of friends waiting by the lockers. He kept his eyes fixed on the back row. Ethan was already at his desk, his head bowed over his sketchbook. As Noah approached, Ethan stiffened, his hand tightening around his pencil as if bracing for a strike. Noah stopped at the edge of the desk. He pulled out the empty chair next to Ethan and sat down. The sound of the chair legs scraping against the floor made several students turn their heads, but Noah ignored them. He placed his hands flat on the desk, his fingers spread wide. He looked at Ethan, who finally lifted his gaze, his eyes wide and guarded. Noah cleared his throat, his voice dropping to a low, steady tone. "I am sorry," he said. The words were simple, stripped of any irony. "I used your voice to get laughs, and I was wrong. I thought being funny meant being the center of attention," Noah continued. "I was just being cruel." Ethan offered a small, tentative smile. The shift in the classroom was not immediate, but it was absolute. Noah stopped gravitating toward the front of the room. He no longer paced the aisles looking for a target. Instead, he spent his mornings in the back row, his chair pulled close to Ethan's desk. When the bell rang for lunch, he did not head for the cafeteria stage or the popular tables. He walked with Ethan to the corner of the courtyard, away from the noise. They sat on the concrete steps, sharing sandwiches and talking about things that had nothing to do with school. One afternoon, a student started mimicking a classmate's stutter near the lockers. The old Noah would have joined in, amplifying the sound for the crowd. This time, Noah walked over. He did not shout. He stood between the mocker and the target, his presence blocking the line of sight. He looked the student in the eye and shook his head once. The student stopped, looked at the floor, and walked away. The crowd dispersed. Noah returned to the courtyard. Ethan looked up from his sketchbook, his eyes tracking Noah as he sat down. The hallway was quieter, and for the first time, that felt like a success. Months later, the auditorium lights hummed, casting a sharp glow over the sea of students. The principal stood at the podium, her shadow stretching across the wooden stage. She adjusted the microphone, the feedback whine cutting through the murmurs. She called Noah to the front. He stood up from the row where he had been sitting next to Ethan. The walk to the stage felt longer than any distance he had covered before. He climbed the steps, the wood creaking under his weight. He reached the center of the stage and looked out. The faces were the same, but the energy was different. There was no anticipation of a punchline. There was only a quiet, expectant stillness. The principal spoke of kindness, her voice echoing against the high ceiling. Noah stood with his hands at his sides, his posture firm. He looked down at the front row. Ethan was there, watching him with a steady, calm expression. Noah realized then that he did not need to fill the space with noise to be heard. He did not need to tear anyone down. He felt the weight of his own voice, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. He smiled, a genuine, slow movement of his lips. He stepped back from the microphone, his movements deliberate and calm, and walked off the stage to join his friend.